And things just got a little bit crazier. Believe it or not, RFK Jr. has made an offer to Joe Biden. I don't think that Joe Biden is going to take this offer, but he has made an offer to Joe Biden. It appears that he was pushed into this by Chris Cuomo. Let's get started with this clip here. It's an interview between Chris Cuomo and RFK Jr. This is right after the debate. For those who are not aware, RFK Jr. had his own debate. Apparently, I think about 6 million people watched that debate. That's a lot of people. Doesn't mean all those people can actually vote for RFK, but that is still a lot of people. But Chris Cuomo, you'll watch this interview and you'll see how Chris Cuomo kind of walks RFK Jr. into this decision. Listen to this.
They're running on fear. If Americans want to vote out of fear, they're going to vote for these guys. If they want to vote out of hope, they're going to vote out of me.
Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who held his own event tonight, moderated by John Stossel, at the same time as the presidential debate. He answered many of the same questions. And as Chris was saying a moment ago, there's a good chance that he won just by being there. And he joins us now. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. All right, first, let's just get your overall thoughts from watching today's debate between Trump and Biden.
I think it's going to leave a lot of Americans depressed. You know, we have a crisis now. The American middle class has been hit by a nuclear bomb. You had 2 presidents who are saying we're having a great economy, and there's nobody in this country. I'm traveling this country every day. People are shattered right now. 70% of Americans are not making enough money to meet basic human needs. And, I'm running into elderly people who are splitting their prescriptions to make them last through the week. Mothers who are downgrading their groceries to make it through the checkout line. People who are taking shortcuts, not bringing a baby to the doctor because of the expense. They're choosing between fuel and food. This is happening not just at the lower levels, but now you have 1% of our country that owns more wealth than the 60% of the middle class. The middle class was just torpedoed by the COVID lockdowns. And there's been no recovery. And I think these presidents were not offering them anything. They weren't telling them how our kids are the first generation of children who aren't going to own their own homes, who are going to live worse than their parents. And neither of them were speaking to those kids and saying, I'm going to get you in the home. Oh, I think that's what I'm doing as a presidential candidate. And I'm thinking about it. How are we going to end the chronic disease epidemic? How are we going to unravel the war machine? They're not talking about those.
Yeah.
How are we going to unravel this corrupt merger of state and corporate power?
But he's not going to unravel the war machine either. Come on. We can talk about how he feels about Israel. Give Israel everything that they need. And he's tried to walk it back a couple times or whatever, but he's not going to fully dismantle the war machine either. Let me go on a little bit more here, and then I want to get to the Chris Cuomo part.
These are the issues people are concerned with.
Do you think, and I agree with you, the debate lacked enormous specificity. There were a lot of sweeping statements like former President Trump saying, I'll end the war in Ukraine before I take office in January, without ever saying what he would do to do that. Or I'll get Evan Gershkovich freed the day after I'm elected, without ever saying how he would do that. I could go on and on. My question to you is, do you feel, after watching this debate tonight, that more people will now give you another look?
I don't know. I try not to make those, projections. I try to avoid spin. And, I just think Americans are I think it was a depressing exhibition that we have 341 million people in this country. And we have brilliant people in this country and great innovators and thinkers. And it's just depressing to say that this is this really the best that we can come up with? And these parties, locked out other people from this debate.
Right.
You know, this is the first debate in history that was privately run by a for-profit corporation that's making money on the debate, and that will probably get money from both of those campaigns, enormous amount. And I think it's going to leave a lot of Americans with a reinforced idea that this whole system is rigged.
But
It's rigged to give us two unsavory characters, and that we don't have any choice. You know, this like Putin. Putin won by 88% of the vote, and everybody's criticizing him. But the way he did that was by controlling the media in his country and making sure that nobody else could get on the ballot.
well, and killing his opponents,
That's how they're being.
There's a little more.
Let's go a little bit further there and say I would add that I think a lot of people, maybe it's just that a lot of people in Russia actually do like what Vladimir Putin is doing. So there could be that. But one of the things that I want to say here, he's right about the housing issue. We just talked about that with the Supreme Court decision. He's right about that. It's a problem that people are not going to be able to own a home. And in reference to the debate, yeah, it's BS that they wouldn't allow the other candidates to appear. And not only that, even before this debate, remember the DNC said there will be no debate when there were primary challengers that were running against Joe Biden. And we all see how Joe Biden is performing. So some of us tried to sound the alarm about that a couple of years ago. But people said, just be glad he's not Trump. Just be happy that he's not Trump. And I was just like, you guys really trying to push Dementia Joe? Like, what is happening here? Like, no, like, I think we can do better as a country. We don't need Trump. We don't need Biden. I think we can do much better as a country. And it's unfortunate that we just had this debate where the other third party and independent candidates were not even a part of the discussion. And I think that was a really big mistake, because I think that if those candidates would have been a part of the discussion, Americans would have been able to see, oh, wait a minute, these people are actually more coherent, more aware, and better on the issues than Biden and Trump. And that's exactly what CNN did not want you to see. This is why they changed the rules. We're going to fast forward to get to the Chris Cuomo part, because I think they split this up here. Here we go. And then I'm going to tell you, some of you have been asking, like, why does Chris Cuomo keep bringing RFK Jr. on? I'm going to tell you about the relationship there as well.
And I think it would help me a lot.
Hey, Bobby, it's Chris Cuomo. Any thought yet to going to the Democrats and saying, look, I am a Democrat, and you guys have been boxing me out. Look at the numbers, look at the infrastructure, look where the people are, or really approaching the president and having a conversation with him, because he may have a hard talk with himself after tonight, Bobby. Any thought about doing either of those things?
So there it is. So there's Chris Cuomo, who put the idea into RFK's head, or it seems like that this is where this initiated. Any thought about going to the Democratic Party and basically explaining to them, look, Biden is not going to beat Donald Trump. You may have a better chance of me beating Donald Trump. So there's Chris Cuomo putting that thought into his head. Let's hear what RFK Jr. says.
Well, poll after poll from the beginning, from last summer, but including this giant poll that was just taken by Zogby, shows that I'm the only one who can beat President Trump. When I head-to-head with President Trump, I beat him. And I head-to-head with President Biden, I beat him in a landslide at 39 states to 11 states. But President Trump, I beat him. There's no other Democrat who can beat him. So I think the leadership of the Democratic Party, the nomination, Chris, is going to fall into the hands of the superdelegates. The superdelegates are largely chosen by the donors to the party. And those donors are these giant corporations like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, the Pfizer, the military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical companies. And I think they probably would rather see Trump in office than me, because, I think I'm a threat to their control of our government.
I hear you, but
Pause for a second. So I agree with them there. They would rather see Donald Trump in office than RFK Jr. They don't want anyone in that's been criticizing the CIA, and he's been doing that pretty heavily during this campaign. So they don't want someone like that in. But RFK Jr. is saying that according to one of the polls that he saw, it showed that he was beating Donald Trump and that Joe Biden was losing to Donald Trump. And for the people who continue to say that all the third party and independent candidates, they need to drop out of the race because they're hurting Joe Biden. When it comes to RFK Jr., according to the numbers, if he were to drop out of the race, that would actually hurt Biden even more. The numbers are showing that RFK Jr. staying in the race right now is actually hurting Donald Trump, not Joe Biden. When you remove RFK Jr. from those polls, the numbers significantly show that Joe Biden would lose. Right now with RFKN, Biden and Trump, it's pretty close. Now, Trump's still beating him in a lot of the swing states, but it's pretty close. But when you remove RFK Jr. from those numbers, it shows that Joe Biden has no chance in hell of beating Donald Trump. So it's really interesting how this is all coming together. But what he is proposing to him is for him to go to the Democrats and to tell them, listen, according to this poll that I saw, I'm actually beating Donald Trump and Joe Biden is not. How about you swap me in for Joe Biden? Now, what does that also mean? If RFK Jr. were to do that, that would mean that what we've been saying all along, that RFK Jr. is still a Democrat, which is what we've been trying to tell people, right? And I'm curious, I should have created a poll for the show. I'm curious how many of you would be willing to still support RFK Jr. if he went back to the Democratic Party? Because I know some of the people supporting him are conservative. I know he's getting a lot of support among independent voters, so I'm curious how many of you would still support him if he did go back to the Democratic Party? Interesting, huh? Let's continue. Here's Chris pushing it again.
Bobby, you don't know if you don't ask. And, you have to know that they're in scramble mode. They're going to pray for something else to happen in the world. You'll see who's friendly to the administration in terms of what people cover the next 2-3 days. Because if all of a sudden something suddenly happens in Ukraine or the Middle East and we stop talking about our election, you'll know why. But strategically, you're learning firsthand with your organization how hard it is to break into the system from the outside. The Democrats are looking for somebody. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be worth the energy for you to make yourself an option.
Who do you have that phone conversation with, Chris? Do you know who that guy is?
I could give you a couple people that I think I would have a conversation with that I'll call you. I'm just saying, Bob, look, you're a known quantity. Everybody knows that you have your own mind, but people know your family. They know what your background is. Nobody's got better Democratic bona fides than you do. And they just pushed you out because of how toxic the party system has become. But now the guy they pushed you out for is in free fall.
So first of all, the party has not become toxic. I think the party has been toxic as long as I can remember. It's never been fair as long as I can remember. So I don't know why Chris is trying to pretend like it just became that way. But notice what is happening here. Chris Cuomo he's heavily pushing. He's pushing here. He didn't ask him once. This is the third time he's going in and saying, well, you should do it. You should go to them. You should do it. Why is Chris Cuomo cheerleading for him so much? I'll show you in a second.
Oh, I'm just throwing it out there because it would really solve their problems and yours at the same time.
Yeah, I cannot predict what they're going to do. I mean,
Would you be open to talking to them?
Ballot,
if they reached out to you, Bobby, would you be talking to them?
Of course.
See, he's really pushing this. Look, would you be open to talking to them if they reached out? So remember, Chris Cuomo came from CNN. He knows a number of Democratic players. Come on. I mean, his brother was governor of New York. His father was governor of New York. So he's been in political spaces pretty much all of his life, right? So he knows some of the Democrat players that he can probably contact himself and say, you should have this conversation with RFK Jr. Really interesting, huh? Mm-hmm. He's pushing.
Of course, I would talk to them. It would put me on the ballot with nobody trying to get me off.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be on the ballot at this point in every state by mid-July. But it would be. But I'm gonna have the the DNC suing me in every state, so to get me back off of it again. So I would talk to somebody.
All right. Well, listen. I think that something I heard you say early on is very resonant. Certainly with the people in my life who are watching tonight. They're sad. They're depressed. The two people on the stage are an embarrassment as choices in a country as great as America. And I think that was felt by a lot of people. And now the question is, what fills that vacuum? On Trump's side of the ball, he is what he is, but anybody who's proud of him with what they saw tonight has way too low a standard for themselves. So I appreciate you. I appreciate coming on tonight here at News Nation. You know you have an open platform for the duration to make your case as you have from the beginning, and we look forward to seeing what all of tonight means to you tomorrow.
Okay, so there is Chris Cuomo pushing RFK Jr. to approach the Democratic Party, to approach the Democrats, and to try to convince them to swap him out for Joe Biden. This actually goes further. It wasn't just this conversation. RFK Jr. has had an interview with Dr. Phil, of all people. When I see Dr. Phil, I always think of, son, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But the reason why there is this type of relationship between RFK Jr. and Chris Cuomo is because there is a relationship between the Kennedys and the Cuomos. And I want to show you where that relationship comes from. It comes from Andrew Cuomo. Peep this. The fallout of Cuomo lots inside the marriage of Kennedy Cuomo. Inside the Kennedy-Cuomo marriage, I'm not going to get into like the details about their marriage. I don't care about that. But this is Andrew Cuomo, and that's Kerry Kennedy. So for those who are not aware, yes, Chris Cuomo's brother was married to a Kennedy. Okay, so I'll just show you a little bit about this. I think this is when he was about to propose. Kerry, she is the seventh of Robert and Ethel Kennedy's 11 children. So she was 2 years younger than Andrew at the time. She was 30, he was 32, a vigorous athlete like most of her siblings, and a graduate of Brown and Boston College Law School. She was ardent human rights activist who had taken the lead in setting up the RFK Center for Human Rights, a perfect counterpart to Andrew's own growing nonprofit for the homeless, the one he called HELP. So for those who are not aware of this, you know, this is way before my time, but for those who are not aware, that's where the Kennedy-Cuomo relationship comes from. It comes from Andrew Cuomo and Kerry Kennedy. Okay, so just FYI, that's why, you know, there is that type of relationship. But this went further because check this out. RFK Jr. was on TMZ and he took this a step further. I'm going to have to read it to you because I can't show TMZ on here. Obviously, TMZ has copyright. RFK Jr., if Newsom, Whitmer, or Moore get the nomination, let's make a deal. There's a game show called Let's Make a Deal. RFK Jr. says if Joe Biden withdraws from the presidential race and another Democrat steps in, he's prepared to make the same offer he gave Biden. If that candidate has a better chance of beating Trump, he will withdraw from the race. Now, this is the part I think some people may not like to hear, but if you watch the TMZ video, you'll hear him say this, that come October, if it appears that he has no chance, he's not going to be able to beat Donald Trump, RFK Jr. said he will drop out of the race. So everybody stay tuned for that. However, if that poll stands and the numbers still stand and show that he can beat Donald Trump, he's not going to drop out of the race. Let's continue on. Kennedy appeared Friday on TMZ Live and restated his challenge. If someone like Governor Gavin Newsom, Senator Raphael Warnock, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, or Governor Wes Moore snag the nomination, he wants an independent poll taking in October. Whoever polls better against Trump will cross the finish line and the other will withdraw. Now, I just want to let you know, he would have to pay for that poll. Candidates have to pay for the polls to be on the polls. This is something a lot of people may not be aware of. That's why you don't see all of the candidates on every poll. So you got to have some money. Okay. So it sounds like he's willing to pay for another independent poll. Now, what's interesting here, the people that are apparently, I guess, in the running, we all knew about Gavin Newsom. They've been talking about him for a long time. Raphael Warnock, are you freaking kidding me? Raphael Warnock. Okay. No, fam, you barely won your Senate race. He barely won. He barely won against Herschel Walker. That's one of the people that they're mentioning that could be in the running. Gretchen Whitmer, again, she's governor of Michigan. I don't think she could win. Wes Moore, I don't think that he could win. And his name has become more frequent recently. So it's not like they were talking about him forever. But none of these people, in my opinion, would beat Donald Trump. None of them. And I know a lot of people keep saying Gavin Newsom. And I'm like, have you spoken to people in California? How they feel about some of Gavin Newsom's decision-making skills economically? I don't think so. And what's interesting about this is all of them are overlooking Kamala Harris. All of them. She wouldn't beat Donald Trump either. She has terrible approval rating. But isn't it interesting how the media personalities are overlooking the vice president of the United States? That is very telling. He goes on to say, listen to this. Biden never responded to RFK's offer, which he said wasn't surprising. A different candidate might, however, take him up on the offer to create unity. Now, I told you guys about unity. I'm past unity. I want solidarity. Kennedy thinks he'd win in a polling contest, telling us, I think my numbers are the strongest against Donald Trump. And if they wanted to take that bargain, I would take it. RFK says it's disheartening that with hundreds of millions of Americans, we ended up with a rematch of Biden versus Trump. He doubled down on Biden, saying the president actually made 45 look reasonable and likable. RFK says his campaign can't be blamed for derailing Biden's bid for re-election, citing the president's frailty as the reason for Thursday's debate collapse. It's not hard to read between the lines. He wants Trump defeated, and he thinks he's the person to do it. I'm curious, how do people feel about that? Now, I will not be supporting RFK Jr. Many of you watch me, you know that. But some of you do still want to support RFK Jr. How do you feel about him possibly moving back over to the Democratic Party? I don't think Joe Biden would make this deal, by the way. I don't think Joe Biden would say, okay, I'll step aside and you can step in my place. I don't think he's going to do that. I think Joe Biden's being very stubborn. Do I think that Joe Biden should resign? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, he should. But I don't think he is going to do that willingly. I think it would have to be a push that came from not only his wife, but honestly, I think Barack Obama would have to be the one to push him to step aside, because I really do think Barack Obama has been the one making all these decisions over the past couple of years, because Joe has not been with it since the 2020 presidential debates. He was losing it then too, which I had called out. So RFK Jr. is extending an offer to Joe Biden to step into his shoes, to push Joe Biden aside, let him be the Dem nominee, because of one poll that he read that said that he is beating Donald Trump in that one poll. Do you think that that would work? I don't think it would. I really don't. But Chris Cuomo seems to think it is a good idea. So it's important that you see these connections. It's important that you understand why Chris Cuomo is trying to push him in that direction, and why Chris Cuomo has defended him quite extensively, actually, because they have that family connection. This is where we're at, folks. This is where we're at. Interesting time.